If science fiction has taught us anything, it's that cloning is never just cloning. It's corporate greed, existential horror, social control, and a guaranteed way to make things deeply unethical. The release of Mickey 17 has placed cloning back in the sci-fi spotlight, resurrecting the age-old questions of identity, autonomy, and ethics that come with copying human life. It's the latest entry, joining stories like Moon, They Cloned Tyrone, Orphan Black, and yes, even Blade Runner 2049. These stories aren't just about genetic duplication. They ask, who owns a clone? Do they have rights? Do they have the same worth as the original? Or are they, as Mickey 17 puts it, just expendable? But before we dig into sci-fi's long history of questioning what makes a person, let's get something straight. How does the cloning actually work? And more importantly, could we really pull off the sci-fi science? If you're picturing a full-grown human clone stepping out of a vat with memories intact, let's just stop right there. That is not how cloning works. In reality, cloning is a biological process with major limitations, and none of them involve making an army of identical copies overnight. The real science of cloning is more complex, less cinematic, and in many ways a bit weirder than what sci-fi imagines. Now, there are three main types of cloning in modern science, and each one works in very different ways. Let's start with gene cloning. This is making copies of DNA. So gene cloning is also called molecular cloning, and it's the most common form of cloning, but it doesn't create entire organisms. Instead, it involves copying small pieces of DNA to study genes, to develop medical treatments, or to create genetically modified organisms, GMOs. So here's how it works. Scientists extract DNA from a cell. A specific gene of interest is then isolated, and it's inserted into what's called a plasmid, not a plasmoid. This is a circular piece of DNA, usually from bacteria. So the plasmid is then inserted into bacteria or yeast, which then multiply, creating millions of copies of the gene. This has some real-world applications in medicine because it's how we mass produce insulin for diabetes or growth hormones and even gene therapies. And then, of course, like I said, agriculture, GMO crops, so making plants resistant to pests, drought, or disease. So we've seen kind of a version of this before in science fiction in Jurassic Park. Not the entire process that they use in Jurassic Park, but the way that they get the DNA. So they're extracting DNA from the insect in the amber, and then they need to clone it in order to make more copies of it so that they can then grow the dinosaurs. But in order to grow the dinosaurs, they have to use reproductive cloning, which we come to in the next section. So method number 2 is reproductive cloning. This is creating a genetic copy of an entire organism. So reproductive cloning is the closest thing to the sci-fi idea that we see around the place, of making a duplicate human being. In reality, though, it's slow, it's inefficient, it is full of biological complications. So the most famous example, we all know it, Dolly the sheep, the first mammal cloned from an adult cell in 1996. So the way that this works is it uses something that's called somatic cell nuclear transfer. A somatic cell is just a regular body cell, and it's taken from the organism that you want to clone. The nucleus then, which contains DNA, is extracted from this cell. So now you've got your DNA. You then take an egg cell from a donor and you remove the nucleus from that egg cell, from the donor cell. So then the nucleus that you want to copy is inserted into the donor egg cell, essentially reprogramming it into an embryo. The embryo is then implanted into a surrogate mother where it develops just like naturally conceived offspring. There's issues with this. So cloning success rates are extremely low. Dolly was the only success out of 277 attempts. Cloned animals often suffer from health issues. Many experience premature aging, immune system defects, and organ failure. But the main thing for our sci-fi concerns is that it doesn't fast forward growth. Cloned animals start as embryos, meaning if you clone yourself, your clone would be a baby. It wouldn't be a duplicate you stepping out of a lab. Now, in terms of looking at actually, like, why were they doing this? Like there's some stuff to do with the idea of what you can do with endangered species conservation, which is really interesting. So apparently there are scientists that are exploring cloning to bring back species that are on the brink of extinction. You're not necessarily going to do it with species that have been extinct for a long period of time, because DNA does degrade. You can't get dinosaurs. There's no dino cloning happening. But species that are about to go extinct, you could clone. Something that I did see that, and I really don't know how I feel about this, is I think that there are some companies out there that are claiming that they can clone your pet. So like clone your dog or your cat. The problem with this is, while the clone would be a genetic copy, it's not the same personality. So it's just another, that makes me very uncomfortable. So let's move to science fiction. So in Mickey 17 and Moon, the clones are produced instantly, fully grown. They have identical personalities mostly, and they have the memories of their originals, which of course is pure science fiction. Because even if human cloning was possible, the clone wouldn't have the original's memories. They wouldn't have the original personality or the original experiences. So we can recreate, or like we can create a genetic duplicate, but we can't recreate a person. Not yet, anyway. The third type of cloning then is called therapeutic cloning. So therapeutic cloning, it's not about making people, it's actually about using cloning technology to create replacement tissues, cells, even organs. What they do is scientists clone an embryo using the somatic cell nuclear transfer method, like in reproductive cloning. But instead of implanting it in a womb, they extract embryonic stem cells from it. And then these stem cells can turn into any type of human tissue, which offers huge potential for regenerative medicine. So the uses are stem cell therapy. It could treat Parkinson's, spinal cord injuries, even heart diseases. There's also custom organ creation. So one day we could be able to grow replacement organs from a patient's own DNA. This would eliminate transplant rejection because the new tissue would be genetically identical to the patient. There'd be no immune rejection issues. The problem with this method is there's a lot of ethical issues involved because the process itself destroys the embryo. This makes it very controversial and it is heavily regulated. There's a movie that came out back in 2010 called Never Let Me Go, which told a horrific story about clones being grown as organ donors to be harvested when their originals needed it. So for now, therapeutic cloning, therapeutic cloning is real, but we are nowhere near growing full replacement bodies or like cloning brains. And let's be clear, no verified human clones actually exist. There have been claims, but every claim, including that weird one that Cloney did in 2002, have all been proven false. So for all the dystopian cloning fiction, real human cloning is still, thankfully, a disaster. But why is this? It's because human cloning runs into major biological and ethical barriers, including the first issue, the spindle protein problem. So a huge roadblock in human somatic cell nuclear transfer cloning is that human egg cells have delicate spindle proteins. These are crucial for cell division. So when you replace a nucleus, as in Dolly's case, these proteins often get damaged, making viable human clones really unlikely. The second problem is aging and genetic defects. So Dolly the sheep actually aged prematurely because she was cloned from an adult cell. And the same problem would likely occur in humans, leading to high failure rates, genetic abnormalities, and rapid aging. It's kind of the reverse of what we want, ain't it? And then, of course, there's the major sci-fi one. There's no memory transfer. Science fiction often assumes that clones wake up knowing everything that their previous self did. This is pure fiction. Memory isn't stored in DNA. It's the product of individual experiences and of neural development. So even if we could clone a human tomorrow, they wouldn't be a carbon copy with the same thoughts, the same personality, the same memories. They'd just be like a genetic twin born at the same time. So there's no Mickey 17 style instant replacement cloning. It's not happening anytime soon. But if history has taught us anything, scientific possibility isn't what stops unethical experiments. And of course, with all these rapid advancements in AI, synthetic biology, and genetic engineering, the line between cloning and science fiction, it might blur faster than we expect. And a great example of this is the movie Mickey 17.
What's it feel like to die?
In Mickey 17, Mickey's entire purpose is to die. He's an expendable human worker killed off in dangerous jobs and then immediately replaced with a new clone, and he's not alone. In Moon, Sam Bell believes he's a human astronaut until he finds out he's just one of many Sams created and discarded by his corporate overlords. They Cloned Tyrone leans into cloning as a tool for racial oppression, drawing parallels to real-world government experiments like MKUltra and the Tuskegee syphilis study. Even Blade Runner 2049 explores cloning ideas in a different way. Bear with me, I know you're shouting at me. Yes, they're replicants. We have manufactured replicants with modified memories and a brutal system that sees them as tools. I stand by it. These stories share a disturbing theme. Cloning isn't about preserving life, it's about exploiting it. So why does sci-fi keep warning us about cloning? Because every time a movie like Mickey 17 or They Cloned Tyrone comes out, we get to ask the same terrifying question. If we had the power to create and control clones, how long before we start treating them as disposable? Because sci-fi's answer is always the same. Not long. Cloning isn't just a scientific marvel, it's a philosophical and ethical minefield. Whether it's Orphan Black questioning identity, Moon exposing corporate exploitation, or Mickey 17 tackling the horror of human expendability, these stories force us to confront what makes a person a person. Because at the end of the day, science fiction isn't about predicting the future. It's about asking if we're ready for it. And when it comes to cloning, the answer is probably not yet.
You're an expendable! You're here to be expended!
Admittedly, I'm not the biggest fan of the science of cloning. Maybe it's because it's biology and, like, I'm a physicist. I like the squishy science stuff, but I do like a cloning story. So I just wanted to end by pointing to a few of the best ones out there that, in my opinion, I'm not speaking for everyone, this is just what I think. So we've got Never Let Me Go, which is a movie from 2010 starring some serious British talent. And the screenplay is written by the one and the only Alex Garland. Ex Machina, Sunshine, Annihilation, Civil War, 28 Days Later, come on. Then we have Blade Runner 2049. Now, I know you're probably shouting at me, and you have been since the start of this video. It doesn't deal with clones. Of course they're not clones. The replicants are without question androids, yes, but they are made using biological material, and they're made in a very similar process to the way a clone is made. And of course, we have all the same questions around individuality and body autonomy. And they're literally like replicated out of each other. Then we have Moon. This is a fantastic movie that looks at clones as labor and the ethics around how much a clone knows about their own existence. Also, it stars Sam Rockwell, so why would you not watch it? One of the best pieces of science fiction TV in recent years, Orphan Black. That, like, oh my god. Okay, so it explores whether a clone is property and what the scientific interest is in this type of, like, genetic research. But more than that, it's a masterclass in acting. Tatiana Maslany, absolutely beyond incredible. Alison is my favorite, seconded by Yelena. Anyway, But seriously, I consistently forgot that it was the same person playing all of these characters. She deserves so much recognition, and we need a season 2 of She-Hulk. Please and thank you. But the one that you might have missed is a movie from 2023 called They Cloned Tyrone. Stars John Boyega, Jamie Foxx, and Teyonah Parris. This movie is a freaking riot. I am not kidding you. It's one of the funniest movies I've ever seen. It's one of the best sci-fi movies of the last decade, at least. And it's without a doubt my #1 cloning movie. The only reason that this movie didn't end up on people's radars was because it had the horrible misfortune of being released during those you remember the SAG-AFTRA strikes? So like nobody could talk about it at the time. Like the stars couldn't promote it. There was just nothing going on. It kind of just appeared on Netflix and then that was it. But I promise you, it's worth your time. If you love science fiction, you will thank me. Teyonah Parris is incredible in this movie. And then a shout out to the movie that inspired this video, Mickey 17. If you haven't seen it yet, it's perfect. It's fun sci-fi that you will rewatch. Robert Pattinson and Naomi Ackie worked really well together, and it's got some really great satirical threads. It's a dark comedy, which is like my vibe anyway, so that's okay. And there's definitely a bit of Starship Troopers inspo in there. You can see it. It follows a similar path as like any cloning story, where we have to ask the question of whether it's ethical and like what autonomy does a clone have. But they also show that clones are not like direct copies and that they are individuals. So really, like what makes a clone any different from a twin? So what are your favorite cloning stories? Are there any movies, books, TV shows that you think did a really good job of using cloning or told it in a unique way? I always find it tough, and maybe that's why I'm a bit hesitant to kind of talk about cloning that much, because it just tends to go down the same route. Like, I enjoy how it could be used to tell a larger story, but the concepts around it can be a bit repetitive. So I'd love to hear if there's any different approaches that you know of. Thank you for watching this video. I would love to know what you think and how you feel about cloning. Is it ethical? Is there any reason that you can think of to do it that doesn't lead to like super evil corporation controlling body autonomy and removing of humanity? I can't think of any. Like, I don't think it's ethical. I don't think it's necessary. I don't think it should be studied beyond as a method of medical treatments. Like the potential for organ transplants, I think that's an incredible one. But human or animals, like, I just think that it's a concept that should stay in the realms of sci-fi and only come out when we need to like take a look at how we are treating each other. I'd love to hear what you think. But that's me done for the day. Have a lovely week. Stay nerdy.
You're applying to be an expendable?
Yeah.
You read through the whole application.
I should have read through it.